Remember the other night when we were ordering our meal and the waitress says, "I'm coming back with the bread," and off she went. And of course, she came back with the bread, and we started looking around at everybody just devouring this bread. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. I'm a chronic people watcher. It's kind of
You are.
fascinating to me how before the meal even comes to the table, certain tables will actually be on their second serving of bread
It truly, I catch her
or
staring
chips.
at people, and I'm like, "Don't stare." And she's like, "But I like to watch people." I'm like, "Yeah, but don't stare because they're going to see you
Just
watching them."
curious.
Well, I
Just
know, but
curious.
I just like kind of freaks me out sometime. But anyway, the bottom line is, we saw people just literally chowing down on this bread, and I was kind of thinking through that a little bit on how that bread is really something that probably hurting them pretty bad, isn't it?
Well, in the clinic, we always look at um, basal metabolic rate. And the majority of
Yeah.
basal metabolic rate never get over 1,900 calories. And we know that in one small little bitty loaf of bread, if you're putting the butter and the margarine or the oil on top of it, you've exceeded 3,000 calories before your dinner gets to the table.
Yeah, and a lot of times the bread, I mean, we don't think about these refined wheat products that are really kind of the constructive means of the bread. The
They call it
protein in the bread,
genetically modified.
they have, and the wheat kernel, if you will, has three types of protein. It's got wheat, it's got gluten, and it's got gliadin. I mean, most people probably heard about the gluten concept, but interestingly enough, we've heard of this thing called celiac disease.
Yeah, oh,
Everybody has,
yes.
but there's
It's
only
on
like
the rise.
2 or 3% of the whole population is celiac disease, but up to 60% are gluten sensitive, which is shocking to me because it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. And we know that that tendency to be celiac can actually be in the genes.
Totally.
However, just because you're born with a certain set of genes doesn't mean you have to have a negative outcome. Now, if we know that and we keep putting that toxin on the system and we barrage it, especially with the genetically modified agent, it's going to get us to that disease quicker and faster. It may not be 40 or
Yep.
50 when it shows up. It might be 19 or 20 or even younger.
We test a ton of people genetically speaking. If you're that science geek out there and you're saying, well, what did genetics say about that? Well, there's two different enzymes. One is called HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. If you're wondering what they stand for, human leukocyte antigen. Big word, but just HLA-DQ2 and 8. But the bottom line is when those things are regulated a certain way, we don't break down gluten. And a lot of people really don't break it down. It becomes this long-term, highly potentially debilitating chronic thing that can happen, and people can't give it up. That blows my mind.
That's right. So they can be highly intolerant because
Yep.
they can't break it down. They can be allergic to it, which is a certain type of immune reaction, or they could be sensitive to it. So building on these different things, we need to think about different alternatives that we can actually do to get this gluten and this bread out of our life if it's the problem.
We do.
What do you think those would be?
Well, there's a couple, but let's don't forget the addictive properties here. The new genetically modified protein that contains the gluten and gliadin specifically, those actually create chemicals when they go into our gut. Remember that?
Oh,
They're
yes.
called
It's like
exorphins, EXORPHINS. They actually bind to the opioid receptors, and we know about the opioid crisis in the U.S. here. But bottom line is, it's kind of sad because it does make people feel good. It takes the pain away for a little bit, and that's why people can't stop.
So it's kind of like a drug.
Totally.
So instead of just one piece, it's 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4 pieces, or maybe even 2 loaves.
You nailed it. That's why the restaurants do that. They're not stupid. They don't use the term addiction. They use the term craveability, and they create this process so you'll come back. And that's why restaurants, they're going to give you free bread and chips because they want to maximize the addictive potential so that you'll think it's a great place and want to come back. We've got to make some changes here.
So it's like the right amount of sweetness, the right amount of saltiness, the right amount of doughiness makes people want to come back. And if
Yeah.
we have to eat every day, it's harder to break an addiction to bread or these things that have these toxic chemicals in it, gliadomorphins, gluten, than it is an addiction to drugs then.
Well, it really is. And the bottom line is we've dealt with people a long time, and I know this is one of our great frustrations. Somebody's like super sick, their gut lining is so tore up. They've developed autoimmune conditions because they won't stop eating these breads that contain high amounts of gluten because it's so addicting. And then they can develop autoimmunity of the colon, like a colitis or something like Crohn's. And that's a bad deal. And we see that happen all the time. We've seen it happen in family members. We've seen it happen in friends, and they just won't stop. And it's like, what are we doing with that? But we've got to give them alternatives, right? You agree with that?
Absolutely. So we know a few alternatives that people can do besides just going for the bread. There are things like cloud bread. We can use almond flour in our bread. We can literally make a loaf of bread out of almond flour, coconut flour, keep it completely gluten-free.
Yep.
Those that are not completely allergic, intolerant, or sensitive to it and just want to moderate their system and not create this GI intestinal permeability or leaky gut, so to speak, they could even go for the sprouted grains.
That's right. Well, when you think about cloud bread, there's recipes out there like everywhere. And so, again, it's egg whites, almond flour, coconut flour, and then there's cauliflower crust in some pizzas. There's
that's kind of genius.
Cauliflower wraps that people are having as a place of these breakfast wraps. Brilliant stuff to sub in there, and eventually you won't lose the taste and the sort of culture of that that we have, and you can still maintain your taste, but you can avoid the addiction and avoid a lot of these things can be rebuilt with the construction of the gut.
So you're saying with these we can avoid the health consequences if we choose healthy alternatives.
We can, and we really need to know kind of what is up with that and test the right things we can test for that. So if you're curious out there and you say, well, am I sensitive to gluten? Reach out to us. We can help you out and give you some good alternatives.
And when you navigate through these economies with people, here's what happens. We want to hold their hand through it, let them know when it's time to buy, sell, reallocate, get out of Dodge, because a lot of times when you're struck with fear does two things. Number one, it can paralyze, and people just put their head in the sand and say, I'm just going to forget about it and hopefully it gets better. Or it causes you to make a wrong decision. And this is why we are here, is to help people navigate through the political quagmire nonsense that's going on, the economic malaise, and the absolute collapse that we're seeing. And when our freedoms are eroding, our political freedoms, our economic freedoms, our personal freedoms, our religious freedoms, our health freedoms, they're all tied together. But you know what doesn't need to erode with that? Our finances.
KirkElliottPhD.com/Sherwood.
There's a lot of talk these days about human enhancement.
Terms like biohacking, bioharmonizing, biosynergizing, stacking, resilience, and anti-fragility.
In our clinic, the Functional Medical Institute, we've been helping people of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds improve their quality of their physiology and maximize their lives.
So, you can follow the latest fads and gimmicks and maybe find some things that work for you.
Or you can add Kingdom Fuel to your daily regimen right now.
It's the simple start to a transformed life.
Our unique meal shakes are balanced, low glycemic, rich in fiber with 20 grams of clean protein, essential vitamins and minerals, healthy fats, and organic fruits and vegetables. Kingdom Fuel is vegan with a complete amino acid profile.
No gimmicks, just proven results.
Start today at sherwood.tv/fuel.
Hey there, Kevin Sorbo here. Now, deep down, we know this. We're more than just a brain and a body. We're a spirit, we're a soul, and we're also a physical temple. If you hit the wall when you're trying to improve one aspect of your being, it's probably because, well, other aspects are sabotaging our success. So that's why diets don't work. And frankly, why so much conventional wisdom from our so-called medical establishments falls flat. Doctors Michele and Mark Sherwood have a very different approach. I should know because I happen to be one of their patients. They address the whole person to get to know you, your challenges, and more importantly, what your goals are. Then they offer a complete plan that addresses your unique biology and your heart. They'll help you discover what you need to experience transformation. So find out more at sherwood.tv/sorbo. That's sherwood.tv/sorbo, or see the link before. Now I'm heading for a workout. You should be going for a workout too. All right, guys. God bless.